Chronopunk episode 2. We are publishing episode 2 of the novel Chronopunk for new listeners. This is a series of episodes that comprise a novel. The novel is called Chronopunk, and we are discussing episode by episode. So if you want to understand what is going on, go back to the first episode, which is actually there's a synopsis before that, and then first episode. It's all on our YouTube page. So let me start with episode 2, Chronopunk episode 2. The purpose of these talks is to introduce the episode. So the readings are in the links. You can read them on Substack free of charge. And we are not reading the actual episode. So the idea is to give some color by the author, some thoughts, some maybe some feedback also. That's part of the idea, is that we get some feedback. So we consider this whole series a sort of crowdsourced editing project. So what happens in Chronopunk episode 2? We start with Mody. The main character is landing in a Croatian village as a on a nude beach. He's fully naked. He is part of the first intergenerational time travel project, and for that he cannot have any physical objects with him. So therefore he lands fully naked. This is just a little tidbit within the story. It's not important, but also maybe for people who are interested in the science of time travel, there is the concept of bringing a person back in time, and that person cannot take any objects with him into that new reality. So Moody's there. There's a little bit of a fun situation there with him being fully naked next to a couple of other fully naked people, but that's not very important. It's just fun. So what is important though is the idea of how can you actually make yourself alive now. So you're being transferred from the future back in the past. You cannot take anything with you, nor money, nor anything. At least that's how the plot is going. So what do you do? And I think this is an interesting question, an existential question. And what Mody falls back to is actually prize fighting. And the reason he falls back to prize fighting is because he actually was a trained MMA fighter back in his day, and that's being sort of explained in the story. But what's really interesting here is another tidbit that comes in this episode too, which is the idea. Well, I mean, if I come from the future to the back, I could potentially just, let's say, do sports betting, right, or bet on events, because I know what's going to happen. And now this is a philosophical conundrum, and I think David Deutsch would not agree with me, because what David Deutsch would say is that you can never go back to your own past. You can go back to another past, but not your own past. So whether the San Antonio Spurs will win the NBA in 2007, which is in my past, what happened, that's not necessarily going to happen to Moody's past, or the one past that he went back to. So there's a little bit of a scientific inconsistency here, but because, as I said in the prelude, in the synopsis, and also in episode 1, I think we discussed this, the scientific precision in this book is held at, let's say, at arm's length, right? So we're not too religious about it, because also I believe the science of time travel itself is really not well developed. So having said all of this, what we discuss in this episode is simply the fact that Moody's told that you cannot bet on future events, because that will collapse your time symmetry. What we mean with that is that there has to be a symmetry. If you want to go back in time, you have to be able to come also back to the future, in a sense, back to your present. And for that, you need the symmetry, and that needs to be upheld. And if you start predicting events, or if you start influencing events, such as, for example, betting on the stock market, knowing what the stock market will do, if you start doing these kinds of things, you're changing your own trajectory, and therefore your time symmetry. So Alisa Chu, the head of the project, has briefed Mody that he can't do that. However, what she says he can do, and this is interesting to me, is you can go and prize fight because you've been trained as a jiu-jitsu, as an MMA fighter, for that matter, in the, let's say, 2030s, 2040s. And what she's saying is that the sport has advanced a lot in since the 2000s, when in the time that he's been sent back to. And you can use that kind of knowledge. And there's a quote in this episode which says, that kind of knowledge travels well with time. So this, I find this an interesting novel, an interesting concept. So there's knowledge that you can actually take back in time, such as, for example, skills. So knowing how to submit somebody in jiu-jitsu is not the same kind of knowing what the stock market will do. I'm gonna leave this in space. Like, I'm not gonna discuss this any much further because I really don't know what the answer is. I think it's just a philosophical question, and this is the beauty of a novel like this, in my opinion. It just opens up lots of questions, and I think that's why people love science fiction. It just opens up these questions. Well, what does it actually mean? What is a fact? Is knowing what an omoplata is, or knowing how to execute an omoplata, or more interestingly, also knowing how to defend against a defense of an omoplata, which is a jiu-jitsu move, or knowing how to take somebody down in an M&A context. Maybe you've learned a certain skill. Let's say one of the skills that has been added to the repertoire of MMA in the early 2020s was the calf kick. It's something that's been around, but it's become sort of the new jab, and that is new. And now, if you go back to 2006 and you use that knowledge, are you really? Is that the same as using a prediction of the stock market? Those are the kinds of questions that this episode brings up to. And now the plot goes that you can actually use that. So Mody becomes a prize fighter, and the character featured in episode 2 is Bogdan, who is a Croatian man who takes Mody under his wing and helps him get to the prize fighting, into the prize fighting business. And Mody just trains and becomes a prize fighter, and eventually he moves on and goes to Chicago, the place where he's actually supposed to start his fight against the Federal Reserve. We will, of course, go into that more in later episodes. What is discussed here is the reason why he went to Chicago is because Lisa Shu, the head of the intergenerational time travel project, she has gotten her PhD at Chicago, or her grad school. I don't know if she actually got her PhD. It's not clear, I think, or we'll see. But the point is, she's actually developed some interesting ideas at the University of Chicago. So she's saying that you need to go there and actually do it there, and that's why he went to the University of Chicago. This is where we stand at episode 2. I think, again, the most interesting question in this episode that is raised is really, what is a fact? What is a historical fact? And if you went back in time, and the byline of the novel, of course, is if you went back in time, what knowledge would you bring back to save the future? So what knowledge would you give to the past to save the future? And those are the kinds of questions that will permeate throughout the novel. And I think this is the beginning of that conversation here. Again, certain facts are certainly not useful, but other things like skills might be useful. Those are still open questions. I'm open for feedback, but that's where the novel is trajectory. Thank you.